Hi everyone, good afternoon. I am Ashley Simpson, your host for today's webinar, 5 Ways to Lose Your Shirt When Buying a Home. The presenter today is Andy May, COO of AAFMAA Mortgage Services. We have a few slides for you today, and we'll be talking for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then Andy will answer any questions you may have. Please ask your questions by typing them into the questions block on your screen. As you may have noticed, you are on mute. So type those into your screen and I will see them and relay them to Andy. This monthly webinar series is brought to you by AAFMAA Mortgage Services, LLC. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of AAFMAA, offering a full spectrum of mortgage products to the military community. Currently, we conduct business in North Carolina and Florida, and we will continue to open offices in states across the country, so stay tuned. The AAFMAA Mortgage Services team consists only of state-licensed loan officers. Among all of our professionals, we have decades of both military and industry experience. We are an equal housing opportunity lender, and for your record, our NMLS is 1423968. As a wholly owned subsidiary of AAFMAA, we operate with the same values and priorities of our parent company. AAFMAA stands for American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association and is the longest-standing not-for-profit association that empowers military families with affordable financial solutions. We accomplish this by being the premier provider of life insurance, survivor assistance services, financial planning, investment management, trust services, and now mortgage, all for the military, not-for-profit. This presentation is educational. It is for general information only and is not specific investment, legal, or tax advice for any of you individually. Do not rely on this presentation alone to guide your home purchase decisions. Since each individual situation is unique, the type of loan that benefits you the most will not necessarily be the same as for another current or former service member. For individual advice, please contact us directly. We produce this webinar series in-house with our own professional staff as a service to our members to help them better understand the resources that are available to them. I'll now go ahead and turn it over to Andy May, who will go over the agenda and then start the presentation.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate everyone being on the phone call today. The agenda is 5 ways to lose money when buying a home. Obviously, you don't want to lose money, and our goal today, as Ashley pointed out, is educational. We're going to show you some of the most common mistakes that home buyers make. And just to give you a little bit of background on myself, not to brag, it's just simply so you know where the information is coming from. I've got 30 years of experience in the mortgage industry, entering the mortgage business in the 1980s, and have done just about everything from underwriting to actuary to credit risk management. In the last 12 years or so, retail loan origination. So love the business and have been doing it my whole life. So the agenda, 5 ways to lose money when buying a home. We'll be reviewing number 1, assuming that everyone you hire is equally qualified. As we all know, everybody is a little different, and we'll go through that on how you can build your checklist to ensure that you hire the best people as your advisors. Number 2, signing a listing agreement or a buyer's contract that you don't fully understand. Number 3, following your realtor's lead on due diligence and earnest money deposits. Your realtor is an important advisor for you, but once you sign a contract law comes into play, and the realtor's fiduciary responsibility to you is reduced. And a fiduciary is somebody who has a duty of care to take care of you. A state licensed mortgage loan officer is the highest duty of care in terms of mortgage lending. So we highly recommend that you speak with a state licensed loan officer, whether at AAFMAA Mortgage or one of our competitors. That's the first question you should ask. And we will be going into how to select the realtor and how to make sure you mitigate your risk in due diligence and earnest money deposits. Number 4, your realtor didn't tell you about that controlled business arrangement that they have. One state in the United States estimates that 90% of all transactions are within a controlled business arrangement, and it also happens to be one of the highest cost closing states. So controlled business arrangements are something you should be aware of and should be asking a lot of questions before you enter any kind of a contract with a realtor or a mortgage loan officer. And we will go into some details on that. And then, of course, number 5, an oldie but a goodie, you don't read all the important documents. That's and we'll be going through what we believe are the most important documents and which ones you should read. So why don't we get started? The first way to lose money is to assume that everyone you're hiring is equally qualified. You can do your research on the internet. We highly recommend that you do that. Roughly 95% of all consumers now turn to the internet first before they begin the process of buying a home. We recommend that you create a balanced scorecard, which is simply pulling together a spreadsheet, or if you're not good with spreadsheets, pulling out a pad of paper and a pen and starting to write down what's important to you. Think the basics, that person's background. We recently competed on a loan where the person had 17 jobs in 17 years. You can go to nmlsconsumeraccess.org and look up every loan officer, find out if they're state licensed or find out if they've had 17 jobs in 17 years. You obviously want a professional who has a background in the mortgage industry serving your needs. Number 2, you can find out, did that person graduate from high school? That's usually an important criteria. How far did they go with their education? Did they stick with it? Will they stick with you? Those are important criteria. And then, of course, years of experience. So you create your own balanced scorecard. You search on the internet for a loan officer. We recommend looking for a loan officer first before you start looking for a realtor. And you interview your loan officers and select which one you would like to use. Don't sign anything without taking it home and reading it overnight. It surprises me how many people are just willing to sign documents. There are a lot of them. And the basics are the realtor contract, the buyer's contract with the realtor, and then, of course, there's about 180 to 100 pages of documentation within the mortgage document that you'll be signing many, many documents. So don't sign anything without reading it. A lot of this sounds common sense, but it's surprising to me how many people have not been through the mortgage process, or if they have, they haven't spent the time that they need to really understand what they're doing. So we put here the nmlsconsumeraccess.org website. It's a federal government website that is an excellent resource for you to use to find out more about the people that you're hiring. They are professionals. They're here to serve you, but you need to be aware that if you're hiring the wrong people, you'll be the one responsible for the outcome of hiring those people. One way to find out if the person is, another way to find out if the person has got a good history is to type their name into Google along with the word complaints, and their name will come up and you'll find out if that person is involved with any past problems. And then, of course, reading their professional website and learning about them is another way to find out about them. So pulling your team together, you start with the loan officer, then you move on to the realtor. The loan officer usually will give you 3 realtor names, and then, of course, you're doing your own research on the realtor, and those are the 2 main providers of information and services to you in the process of getting your first home purchased. And they also will recommend additional participants in referring services to you, such as the attorney, the appraiser, etc. So if we go to the second way that you can lose money is signing a buyer's contract that you haven't read. or fully understand. So we put a couple of the key elements here. If you want to Google them after this presentation, please feel free to do so. But broker exclusivity is important. A lot of consumers are surprised to know that if they walk into a house with a realtor and they haven't signed a buyer's contract and they later buy that house, they owe that realtor a commission. If they sign a buyer's contract with a second realtor and they buy the original house that they walked into with the original realtor, they now owe that person a commission too, so you wind up paying two commissions. So broker is the realtor here. The exclusivity that they have with you is important to understand. The length of time that the contract is for is also important to understand, and I recommend 3 months is a good length of time. You can always renew it. Some realtors will ask you to sign a 1-year contract, and I've seen it where it doesn't end well for the consumer because the realtor may not let you out of the contract. And then you've got a lot of time on your hands because you're waiting for the contract to expire. So 3 months is a good duration. Compensation is something that you can negotiate. I always hire a realtor. I always have. I bought a lot of homes. Realtors are incredibly important, and they also typically make 3% on the buy side and 3% on the sell side. That is negotiable. The higher the loan size or the higher the purchase price of the home, some realtors are willing to negotiate lower on their compensation, and of course the desired home that you're looking to purchase will be in the buyer's contract. So that's the second way to lose money. Just 3 more ways to lose money, and or try not to lose your money. The third one is something that's relatively new for most home buyers that haven't been in the market in the last 5 or so years, is writing a due diligence check to the seller, and the seller cashes it and keeps it. Typically it's $500 or $1,000 or something like that. I've seen it as high as $8,000, which is not good. So it's up to you to make a determination of what you think the due diligence check should be made out for. And so what that does is it gives money to the seller for entering into the purchase and sales contract with you, the buyer. And now you have a period of time to review the house. Typically it's 10 days. I usually recommend to our consumers that they don't put a lot of money into the due diligence because you'll never see it again, or it's very unlikely that you'll see it again. The earnest money is something also that you may never see again. It is typically a 3-week time period when your money goes hard and you can't get it back unless you get denied on the mortgage. So the earnest money is also similar to the due diligence money. It's there to compensate the seller for entering into the contract with you and allowing you to research the home prior to purchasing it. Both of those monies will be used towards your down payment or closing costs if you fulfill the contract and buy the house. If you choose not to buy the house for any reason, you may lose both your due diligence and your earnest money, which can get quite expensive. As you see on this slide here, $1,000 to $3,000 for due diligence, $2,000 to $8,000 for earnest money. You can lose a lot of money just on the due diligence and earnest money part. There are also additional costs that you need to be made aware of, and those include the appraisal, anywhere from $450 to $500 depending on what part of the country you're in. Inspections, in certain parts of the country, those can run $500. You want a general home inspection, then you'll also probably want a radon inspection. Interestingly, I saw today on a government website that radon is the second leading cause of cancer. So in many parts of the country that have basements, they test for radon, and there are additional inspections. All of those combined can cost you $500 or more. So that is the third way, is not truly understanding the timing of due diligence and earnest money deposits. The fourth way is your realtor didn't tell you about what is known as a controlled business arrangement. These have been around literally since the 80s. Companies get together And even though you know, there are laws on this, such as RESPA Section 8, that say you can't pay a thing of value for a referral. If you do a controlled business arrangement or an affiliated business arrangement and file that document with HUD, our federal government, the Housing and Urban Development Department, you are allowed to split fees and share in certain monies. I recently looked on Google for CBAs and the pitfalls of CBAs, and one article had 15 different pitfalls of a CBA for the consumer. So at AAFMAA Mortgage, we don't have any. We are a state licensed mortgage loan officer company, and we have a higher fiduciary responsibility to you. So we do not have controlled business arrangements. We do have one competitor that gets paid up to 40% of the realtor's commission from the realtor, and at AAFMAA Mortgage, we would much rather have you negotiate that commission reduction and get a much better deal for yourself than paying the mortgage lender that money. So it's your responsibility to know what a CBA is. You should ask your realtor up front for an acknowledgement in writing that states they do not have a CBA. Many of them don't give it to you until much later in the mortgage process after you've spent a lot of money in earnest money, due diligence, inspections. It's good to get that out of the way up front. The attorney may actually also be involved in the controlled business arrangement, and to me that's the biggest compromise of all, because they're there to represent you and advise you. If they're getting paid from somebody else in the transaction, that's not a good thing. So you should also ask about whether the attorney is involved with a CBA. And the one hidden fee that I've always not been fond of is the $500 administration fee from the realty firm. So ask about that up front if your realty firm has any kind of a fee. Oftentimes they don't tell you about that until much later in the process. And the last thing is that lenders still, to this day, it's surprising to me, raise your interest rate at the closing table. Now, state licensed mortgage loan officers do not typically do that because you can complain directly to the state. But if you're not a state licensed loan officer and you're working for a federally regulated entity, you will have to complain to the federal government, and good luck with that. It's quite difficult. So let's move on to the fifth and final way for losing money during a home purchase, and then we'll open it up to questions. Some of the important documents that you really need to spend some time with are the loan estimate that used to be known as the good faith estimate, the GFE. They're now referring to it as the loan estimate, and that shows you what your interest rate is and what your APR is, as well as all of your closing costs. So it's all spelled out on a couple of sheets of paper, and you should definitely get a loan estimate up front and compare them with other lenders. And you get that from your mortgage loan officer. The appraisal is also your responsibility to understand. Your professional state licensed mortgage loan officer, as a fiduciary of yours, really understands the appraisal, and you should have a conversation with your loan officer prior to even getting started with the home buying process. I put down here square footage costs are important. That to me is one of the single most important things you should be looking at, is the heated and cooled space that you're buying. How does that compare to other homes on the street you're buying for similar homes? Is it a split level? Is it a 2-story? Is it a 3-bedroom, 2-bath? You find a similar home with a similar square footage, and you find out what it sold for in dollars per square foot, and that keeps everybody pretty much on the right path for what the true cost or true market value of your home is, which is what an appraisal does. It tells you the true market value of the home. The third item that you really need to pay attention to is the deed. You can split that up in a number of different ways. It can be in your own name. You can hold the deed or that's the ownership document. You can hold that with your spouse. I've seen it where somebody will actually hold it with a unrelated third party. So you can hold the title any way you want, and your closing attorney that is selected is the person who you should have that conversation with. State licensed loan officers give you advice throughout the entire process. They are your fiduciary, so they'll obviously have an opinion on the deed as well as the note. And the note is the mortgage. That's the document that states the interest rate that you've got and how much money you owe. That document we typically recommend, if one person can qualify, you should only put one person on the mortgage note. If you need both people, both husband and wife, to qualify, then they both go on the note. And the reason we recommend only one is if you were to get into financial troubles and 3, 5, 7, 10 years after you did the mortgage, only one person gets the credit impairment for not paying the mortgage. The other person is still flying at a higher altitude in terms of their credit score. So that's one thing that we would recommend, is to take a look at, do you really need both people on the note? And of course you can talk to your closing attorney about their thoughts on that. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there was no Paper Reduction Act. We are around 80 to 100 pages of documentation to close a mortgage loan. A lot of those documents are esoteric and still need reading, such as the Patriot Act, but you do need to review all the documents. Most states are buyer beware states. If one of your professionals makes a mistake, you pay for it. They do not pay for it. So the buyer beware means you are responsible. So if the appraiser decides that when they're appraising your house that it's a 3,500 square foot house, but the top floor was not properly permitted, and you just lost 1,500 square feet and it's really only a 2,000 square foot home now, or a 2,500 square foot home, that's your problem. And it's a costly problem. Your appraiser probably should have told you about that, or your realtor, but those are the kind of questions that you need to seek out, and a state licensed mortgage professional loan officer can help facilitate your knowledge and experience as you move through some difficult times. People that happens to, it's not a good thing. So make sure you ask all the questions, make sure you stay informed. In summary, every transaction is different. Hiring a professional is very important. It's not as simple as, gee, I'll just have my sister do my mortgage, or I'll have my brother be my realtor. It's a lot tougher than that now. There's a lot more pitfalls, and the timing of everything is much more important than it ever has been in the past. The last 5 years, in my opinion, have really favored the seller of a home. The home buyer, it's costing more money, and it's costing more money in terms of risk. So with that, that is a summary of the top 5 ways that you can lose your shirt in the home buying process. We're happy at AAFMAA Mortgage to answer your questions, even if you are using a different loan officer and you want to get advice. We're here to serve you. We're not-for-profit, and we're here to try to find ways to make your life better. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley to see if we have any questions.
Great. Yes, we do have some questions. So thank you so much, Andy. I see that we have a couple of questions for Andy to answer already, but as he does answer the existing inquiries, please don't hesitate to ask your own. And just so you know, once again, Andy is the COO of AAFMAA Mortgage Services, and he oversees all transactions of AMS. He works from our headquarters, in the AMS headquarters in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Okay, so Andy, our first question is, when you said within the third slide, so the third way to lose your shirt, what did you mean by following your realtor's lead?
Great question. Most realtors are going to want you to follow the standard purchase and sale contract. They don't want to make any adjustments to it. It just makes their life a lot easier. I've seen it where a home buyer says, you know what, the first 5 days, I don't want the due diligence check to go hard and lose it. I would at least like a first look at the house and make sure that there's no leaks in the roof or other problems with the house. Since that first check disappears, that's probably in your best interest, but your realtor rarely, if ever, will make that recommendation. In fact, they'll often discourage you saying, well, that's not standard. Well, of course it's not standard. Also, you know, losing money is not something that we want to see our members do. So if, you know, following your lead, you're going to get a lot of advice both from your mortgage loan officer, your realtor, your closing attorney, your appraiser, the inspectors. Use your common sense and start to figure this out. As you can see from slide 3, you can lose $10,000 in this process if you have people that aren't looking out for you. So adjusting the due diligence timelines, and especially the earnest money timelines. I've seen it where some realtors will put the earnest money and have that go hard, meaning it's at risk, after 10 days. There's no reason for it to be 10 days. You should push that back to maybe 21 days. So getting a feel for it and adjusting to fit your risk tolerance, and also understanding the seller is very important. Great question. Thank you, Ashley.
Great. So question number 2 is, even though this wasn't covered explicitly in the presentation, the question is, generally how long do I have after I sell my existing house, my primary residence, before I start paying capital gains taxes if I don't immediately purchase a new home?
It's a great question, and I will do what all mortgage loan professionals are taught to do and refer you to your CPA. We don't provide CPA advice. The exclusion for a gain on sale of home is in the IRS tax code, and I don't want to give the wrong answer and provide the wrong date. So I'll refer you to your CPA or the IRS tax code. And if you call us directly, I can look that up for you and get a printout for you, but we don't give advice on taxes. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Great. Good to know. Also, can you please explain again, maybe in different terms, what exactly the APR and coupon are?
Great question. I love that one. The coupon is your interest rate that you are quoted. So, for example, we recently closed somebody at 3.25% on a 30-year fixed VA loan. That is your coupon. So that's the interest rate that you're paying on the mortgage debt that you borrowed. The APR is simple. It's simple to me, but to many consumers, it's a little more complicated. You take all of your closing costs and amortize it out over 30 years and back into an interest rate that would pay for all your closing costs. So typically the APR is going to be 1/8 of a point, 1/4 of a point, or, you know, in some instances 3/8 of a point higher than your coupon. And what that does is it says over the course of the 30 years, that extra 1/8 of a point or 1/4 of a point would have paid for all of your closing costs. So APR is more of an all-in expense of owning that house. The government thought it was important to provide to you, similar to fuel standards, where they say, well, gee, what's the annual cost to run this car? That's on the new cars. They stick it on the side of the window. I've really never paid much attention to that on the car, and most consumers really don't pay attention to the APR because it's a complicated concept. And if you've got time and really want to know how to make the calculation, I have a HP 12C here, one of the old-fashioned ones, not one on your cell phone, and I can show you how to make that calculation. Great question.
Great. So if I screen share, let's just go through all 12 steps, right? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Andy. But Now, okay, another question. Now, as from a current home buyer, from an existing home buyer, why would a buyer pay both due diligence and earnest money? I've only paid earnest money.
That's very interesting. I've not heard of anybody just paying earnest money only. I think that was before, I'm thinking that that consumer probably bought a home before the recent laws were introduced. So about 4 years ago, they changed all of the way that a consumer went through the process, because many consumers would wait until the very end to cancel the loan and say, oh, I didn't qualify. And there was no recourse for the seller. They just took the home off the market for 30 days, didn't entertain other offers. And so about 4 years ago, the government changed the process and requires you to, well, it doesn't require you, but suggests that you put due diligence money at risk up front to compensate the seller for taking the home off the market and saying it's under contract. So that person must have bought a home longer than 4 years ago, or they should give me a call, please, and explain which state that's in, because I have not seen a situation where all you're doing is earnest money. So interesting question. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. And then I have one here. This one comes from a first-time home buyer. You did keep talking about state licensed loan officers. What's your recommendation for the first step that I would pursue towards making sure that I do have a state licensed loan officer?
Well, on slide number 5, the first way to lose money, we put the visit www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org. And there you can type in your mortgage loan officer's name, and you will find out whether they're a state licensed mortgage loan officer. You will also be given a history of every job they've held over their career. As I mentioned on this slide, we recently were competing against somebody who had 17 different jobs, most of them outside of the mortgage industry, in 17 years. You know, that's not somebody you want advising you on your largest liability. So I would recommend going to Google and looking for local mortgage brokers or bankers and start to understand what their message to you is. What are they telling you? Are they telling you, you know, get into this house with no money and I can do it the cheapest, which everybody tries to tell you that? Or are they trying to tell you to look beyond that and to truly understand who you're dealing with? Because my belief after 30 years of doing this is you're going to get a very fair deal from somebody who has the knowledge and experience. If you're looking for that person who is saying get a 0% interest rate, I'm here to tell you it doesn't exist. So, you know, I'd go to the internet, I'd do my research, I'd type in the loan officer's name and the word complaints into Google, and I'd go to nmlsconsumeraccess.org. I'd see whether other associations that loan officer belongs to, like the Mortgage Bankers Association. Are they a true professional, or do they, I mean, the lowest level of qualification to be a mortgage loan officer when you're not state licensed is to be 18 years old. Are you just simply working with somebody like that? And it's up to you as the buyer to educate yourself.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And also, that's just a reminder that AMS is currently doing business in Florida and North Carolina. So if you're looking for a state licensed loan officer in any of those 2 states, please don't hesitate to call AMS. And as we open up in other states, which we anticipate quite a few in the next few months, we will keep all of our members posted. So thank you again, Andy, and thank you everyone who asked a question and everyone for attending. If we didn't fully answer your questions, or if you think of any others, please reach out to us at mortgage@afma.com, or you can email Andy directly at amay@afma.com, as you see on your screen. Actually, no, his personal email is not on there, but it's amay@afma.com. And we'll go ahead and conclude here, but again, reach out to us. whenever you need to, and do not hesitate to ask any questions or for any help. This is what we do, and as you can tell, Andy knows a lot, and he loves what he does. This weekend, you'll receive a follow-up email with instructions on how to access this recording, and you can always sign up for future webinars of any of our entities or review past webinars as we continue with the series at mortgage.afma.com. This is our first mortgage webinar, but we will be keeping all of those on the site. And of course, if you found this information helpful, please share it with your family and friends. AAFMAA membership grows stronger every year, and it's because members like you introduce your eligible friends. Thank you all again so much, and have a great rest of your day and week.